This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 87, and tonight I am joined by Grace.
Hello.
Inky.
Hey, what's up?
Kodra.
Hi.
Neff.
Hello.
Pizza.
Hello.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hey there.
And our listeners are hopefully not going to hear it because I'll edit it out. But God, I just hitched there when I kept trying to say Ashgar because Ash isn't with us tonight.
It's been a while without him.
I know, I always start the intro off with Ashgar, and yeah, it's gonna be a thing without him. So tonight you're gonna notice a bunch of voices that you've not heard on the podcast before because we are trying something that we've not actually done before. And this all started, what was it, last week when we were deciding that, man, we could do an entire show about villains.
Yep.
And this is absolutely us attempting to do an entire show about villains. And in order to do a single topic show, we thought, man, it would be kind of cool to grab some guest hosts. So, it'd probably be best for the listeners to do a little intro to the people because they're not people they're familiar with. So, Inky, can you get a 500-foot view of who you are and whatever?
Hi, so I'm InkyBrushes. I am a gamer and illustrator living in the Seattle area. I'm primarily interested in more open world exploration games, but I have traditionally liked a lot of different stuff, and I like a lot of tabletop games as well.
That's perfect. Pizza, how about you?
I am Pizzamaid. I am one half of the podcast Heroines of the Cherry Blossom, along with Sushi Geisha. Predominantly, I like to play MMOs as well as otomes, which are generated towards the girl demographic. So basically, I look at 2D men, and I approve them with my choices.
That's awesome. So we've never actually done this part where we actually had people introduce themselves, because I think we've thrown Neff at people without ever saying who Neff was. So yeah.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I was just glad you didn't make me say anything because I don't have any idea what I'd say.
I'm some person that likes Wildstar a lot. That's me. I'm Grace.
Yeah. Yeah, because at this point, maybe we should have done that at some point, but no.
A year ago?
Yeah, that would have been a really good idea.
Look, we're not really professional at this, so that's the thing.
Yeah, way to give me a warning that you're gonna be like, oh, hey, Inky, who are you? Describe yourself.
So welcome to the podcast. This is how things work. Stuff happens. So yeah, the idea behind this podcast, just to kind of summarize, was when we've been doing the topic-based shows where we've got 4 or 5 topics that we discuss, and one of them came up last week was villains in video games. And we all kind of said, this is probably too much for a show where we talk about other things, because we could literally make an entire show about that. And because we said that, now I almost feel obligated to do it. So tonight we're going to talk about a mixture of things, like what makes a good villain, or what are villains that we like, interesting plot twists, betrayals, different kinds of villains that affect us in different ways, and maybe even just epic boss battles. Because I think this is going to be a topic that is going to be slightly different to everybody that's here. And to break the ice, I figured I would start it off, and hopefully things will flow from here. But so when I think of a video game villain, the one that will always pop into my head as number one spot is Kefka from Final Fantasy 3/6.
God, I knew somebody was going to say that.
Well, he
Dude,
was number one on my list too.
Kefka is number one with a bullet, because first of all, he was the first time I was introduced to that kind of villain in a game, because this was 1994 when Final Fantasy 3 was released here, and I had never encountered a villain like that, because really,
what do you mean by like that? I guess
so the creepy
clown
snidely whiplash, mustache twirling villain from Japanese RPGs. Because like there's a lot of those villains that I've encountered since then, but Kefka was kind of the first for me.
Well,
Like-
Kefka stands out in Final Fantasy because a lot of the Final Fantasy villains, it turns out that, oh, they were mind controlled, or oh, they have this whole tragic backstory, and they're working for some greater evil and such. Not Kefka. Kefka's just evil. He is not apologetic about it. He's not working for anybody else. Like, you know, he takes care of that Emperor Gestalt very quickly. And he's just out to destroy everything.
I mean, he's very much that power behind the throne villain that, you know, starts off as kind of a side character, but then quickly becomes the ultimate evil in the game.
So, I was actually thinking about Kefka a lot because I think Kefka might be the best Final Fantasy villain. But
God, I wonder if there's some fighting that's gonna happen.
well, but mostly I am not terribly impressed with a lot of the Final Fantasy villains, is what I was coming to.
A lot of the villains that are working for greater evils themselves tend to be very flat. I mean, how much do you really remember about Garland or even Golbez from the game itself?
Or what, Magnus from Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
I mean, they're kind of two-dimensional, and the only important thing about them is that, they ultimately see the wrong in their ways and become, you know, a good guy at some point.
If they do gain a third dimension, it's after they break free of the influence of the ultimate evil and, you know, join your side.
Okay, so I'm super curious. For everybody who really loves Kefka in here, for whom was it the first time you'd run into the type of unrepentantly evil, like, creepy court jester type?
In a video game, yes.
Absolutely, it was the first time in a video game.
Because, you know, there is this guy called the Joker.
Right.
Yeah. But for the same reason why I love Kefka is the same reason why I love the Joker. Is it's unpredictable chaos, but it's purely chaotic evil.
And there's no attempt to make you like him or feel for him.
That is not the type of villain that I like. Like, I concur that is a memorable villain, but it is not my preferred type of villain.
Yeah,
same deal here. Like, I totally agree with Grace on that one. I
actually I was never as much of a fan of FF6 because Kefka never was that interesting a villain for me. And hearing both Bell and Thalen comment about why he was interesting, I fought my Kefka villain years before I played FF6. Malcolm from Carandia is basically Kefka.
Yes.
Yeah, I never played that game.
And I played that game. I played that game years before I played FF6.
I didn't play it until after FF6, but you're right, very similar. Except with Malcolm, they ended up trying to make him like the hero of a game later on, and boy, that didn't work.
Well, yeah, that wasn't super great. But in the first game, he was terrifying.
Yes,
and like that's really interesting to me because like for me, part of what makes Malcolm so scary as that kind of villain is because as in Carandia, you're pretty powerless. Like, he's a crazy powerful wizard, and you're like some dude collecting shit off the ground.
Yeah.
Whereas in FF6, like, no, you're actually pretty scary powerful in your own right.
I mean, you actually start out more powerful than Kefka.
Yeah.
The way that it's framed, and then he, you know, moves some statues around, and everything goes to shit.
I just think that's interesting because I never really thought about why I've never found Kefka all that interesting.
I can see if you found Malcolm first.
I think when it was framed, just discussing villains, I didn't even necessarily put a person as specifically a villain. My first immediate thought was Dysentery from the Oregon Trail.
Oh my god.
That is so perfect.
Yes.
It's my earliest recognition of a villain, something that just couldn't be overcome, something that couldn't be defeated. So I guess it transcends upon not just people, but just obstacles that you have to overcome in a game. So for some reason, I didn't even think of Kefka first. I thought of Dysentery.
Well, and I think that's also like
the
same reason why you bring up Dysentery is the same reason why, like, apocalypse genres and zombie genres, like, to me, fall into that same category as dysentery, where it's this force that's outside of your control that the world itself hates you and is kind of a villain.
Really,
Okay.
just like a lot of horror games are like that as well. You know, like freaking Amnesia. Oh, if you take a close up look at the monster, it's really not that scary. But the whole time you're immersed in that world and you're trying to, do your stuff around the game, and this thing is just like creeping on you and following you, and you can't do about it.
Yeah, I was thinking like Dead Space has a very similar, like, there's this horrible virus that does frightening things that you just gotta deal with.
Amnesia's really funny because I couldn't actually get to the point where the monster made itself apparent. Like, the atmosphere of that world was so oppressive and so stressful for me. I got to like 15 minutes in and was like, I am feeling physically ill playing this game. Like, this world is awful.
I've never actually played Amnesia, but I think I would probably like it because I like those kind of settings where everything is wrong and I'm trying to survive and eke out an existence in this horrible place.
Oh my god, it's wonderful. You should definitely play it. They came out with a new one recently, which I heard was not quite as good, but definitely.
Machine for Pigs?
No, Soma.
Oh, okay.
But there was actually a video game world as villain that I had put down on my list, which was Antichamber. And I mention that because the world of Antichamber feels alive. Like, it feels like this malevolent force that is, like, undermining me at every turn. Because
it's like gently mocking you while you move through it.
It is constantly, like, pulling these little defiance of Euclidean geometry and physics as I understand them to, like, frustrate and mock me. And there's no actual, like, entity engaging with you other than you are, like, trying to make your way through this world, and it doesn't necessarily make any sort of logical sense.
I think that, I don't know, this is just my personal. I find the best villains or game settings or whatever you want to call it, the things that create the most fear and like emotional response. I don't think they're necessarily just quite so straightforward as, oh, this is a villain and I hate that guy and or he's scary. It's more like what goes on in your.
Yeah, I think an emotional response is very important to a really good villain. It doesn't necessarily have to be a particular emotion. It could be fear, it could be, it could be an appreciation of the villain's sense of humor.
Yeah, I mean, the best villains that I can think of are I'm not necessarily afraid of them, but say take GLaDOS, right? Like, that's an amazing video game villain, and I'm not afraid per se of her, but I respect her. I am entertained by her, and I don't doubt for a second that she will go to great lengths to end me. So, I think that's the sort of villain that I'm a big fan of. She was sort of the top of my list of villains because she's also clever and funny and snarky and trying to undermine me, not necessarily, I mean, obviously moving directly against me, but also subtly trying to undermine, sort of my spirit and my will to move against her.
Well, and part of the thing with GLaDOS is, like, you never know what she's saying that you can take at face value and what is just absolute wrong. Like, because some of the things she does say are true from a certain perspective.
It makes me think of I put on my list GLaDOS and Shodan,
yes,
because they're kind of two sides of the same coin, and they do similar things in really different ways. Because Shodan is absolutely malevolent and is not pretending to be on your side at any point. And then at one point she tricks you and you realize that she hasn't been lying to you and she has been absolutely telling you the truth, but knows that you don't trust her.
Yeah.
And is just abusing that.
Well, I love the whole idea of Shodan as this being that was created by humanity and betrayed them. And then in the second game, creates her own children that then betray her. And that sense of just just outrage on her part that they would do that. And so she has to get, to trick you into helping her destroy these things because they, dared to stand up and not accept her as their god, basically.
Yeah, like she has the tables turned on her in the exact way that that she betrayed people originally, and like the outrage that she has to basically suffer the same thing that she inflicted is just palpable.
So I do want to talk a bit about GLaDOS, because what I love about GLaDOS and I love about all of my favorite villains is the way that they get to spend time with you as a character. Like, they are with you for almost all of the game, like, in your ear, talking to you, trying to, like, guide you or trick you, but they're always interacting with you, even if they're not present.
Like, FaceTime is super important.
Yes, absolutely. Like having that interaction, because a lot of games, many games, especially very early games, set up their quote unquote villains, and they're just, there to be a boss battle at some point, and they're sort of a caricature of some sort of villain archetype, but they're not very interesting. But when you have a villain like GLaDOS that is sort of in your ear for the entire game and following every step that you take and interacting with you, or at least responding to you, and you're hearing that personality come out, and you're hearing their reaction to the actions that you're taking, it makes all the difference in the world.
Well, so another villain that is that same thing is Andrew Ryan from BioShock. From the second you start that game, he is in your head the entire game.
Yes, and it builds up to one of the most incredible face-to-faces you have with a villain in pretty much any game. To the point where he robs you of the satisfaction of defeating him.
Yep. Well,
like,
him,
perfect.
and then also Frank Fontaine. In sort of a reversal of it, where you don't even realize that you're talking to a villain, and he's just manipulating you the entire time, so that when he finally does, make his big play and use you, it's just you hate him so much. Like I hated Andrew Ryan, and was infuriated with him, but Frank Fontaine was so much worse to me.
Yeah.
I think the BioShock folks really did villains right.
Yeah. They were very good at it. I think that you're talking about bits and pieces of what makes a compelling villain. For me, it's the possibility that the villain might be right.
Yep.
Which I think is why Kefka never got to me, because like there is no chance that Kefka's right. He's just crazy and evil.
Yeah,
and like that's really dangerous, and he needs to be stopped. But it's not like he's going to present me with an argument that what he's doing is that he's not actually the villain, and that I'm the villain for stopping him. But man, does Andrew Ryan pull that off.
Yeah, I find myself more drawn and compelled to villains that make me gather the mindset or mentality that maybe they're misunderstood, and I actually somewhat sympathize for them. If you can do that for me as a villain, I feel like that's what makes you top notch, because I see the full spectrum of you right there.
Yeah, for me, a great example of that, the best villain in the Mass Effect series is the Elusive Man.
Yep. He was also on my list because, like, you never know, is he true or is he a villain? And you go through several stages of that while you're playing the game of, at first you're sure he's a villain, and then you think, no, well, maybe he has some right thoughts here, and
maybe he's not wrong.
Yeah. The villains of that type, though, just kind of make you feel dirty.
That's what's so effective, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what makes them good and certainly memorable. Like, you don't forget that sort of reaction.
In Atomes, it's so prevalent to see who are the quote-unquote bad guys or villains, because they're predominantly jealous girlfriends or people trying to split up a relationship. But in some Otome games, it's themselves, the person that you're trying to romance is actually the villain. Can kind of give you that plot twist. That's what makes them memorable, even though obviously they're not in it for love. So I enjoy that about certain villains, when they can do that for you.
And for me, I don't know, like some of it is my own personality. So a villain that is just a straightforward, blunt instrument is not nearly as interesting to me as a villain who is manipulative and clever. And, like when you can see all of the strings that they have been pulling and watch them sort of come together in some sort of master plan, that is an interesting and sort of seductive almost villain to me compared to someone who is like, all right, I'm going to take over the world and I'm going to unleash this army. Ha 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 ha.
So there is a villain that's we haven't mentioned yet who is of the Kefka model is probably my favorite, and that's Handsome Jack.
Yeah.
Handsome Jack is of the Kefka model.
I was wondering when he would come up.
Yeah,
He's
like
one of those that's in your ear the whole way.
I absolutely think Handsome Jack and Kefka share a common thread.
But
okay, what thread?
Wow, I super disagree.
Yeah,
they're these super showy madmen that
very childish seeming.
Yeah, but at the same time they're like diabolically evil.
The difference is though that I feel like Kefka is like doesn't have any of the human qualities that really make me appreciate a villain, whereas Handsome Jack is like in his miserable humanity is where his villainy comes from.
For me, like Handsome Jack is also on my list, but it's because he's a dude bro. He's like, you're like fighting this dude bro, and he's just got more power than he should have because he's a putz, and he knows it, and he's just riding that train as far as it'll go.
He is a totally self-absorbed narcissist who will, use every bit of power he has to, push himself up.
Or push people that he doesn't like down.
Yep, which is exactly what Kefka is.
The whole time I was fighting Handsome Jack, though, we're sort of like dealing with him. What is idiot doing? It's like, it's like some 14-year-old teenage boy got a hold of like God mode or something. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes me hate him so much, because like he shouldn't have all of this power. What is he doing with it? Oh, he's squandering it in stupid ways. But it's super inconvenient for me and everyone else.
Yeah, Handsome Jack definitely is the villain that annoys me the most. Like, talk about drawing out an emotional response. He annoys me. Like, every time I hear his voice, it's like nails on a chalkboard.
And for me, the worst part of that is that the one thing he has going for him is he can deliver a line. And so he'll like say something and I'll laugh and I'll be like, no, wait, asshole. That wasn't funny. I'm not laughing at you.
It wasn't funny because you're the object of the thing that he's making fun of. But it is absolutely funny. Like, yeah, he's just about to, like, jettison you off of something or, fill you full of holes. But it was funny. Like, it was totally funny when he said it.
He's that guy who laughs at his own jokes.
Yeah.
He's the best kind of person.
Yeah, I was going to say, I laugh at my own jokes.
Exactly.
Villains that seem to annoy me are the ones in fighting games. Just because I can't beat them, or they have that same tagline that you hear over and over again, and after about a 3-hour period of listening to it, you just want to throw your controller. Like M. Bison, Shao Kahn, those are the ones that annoy me more than anything.
Goro, where you're like, ugh.
So this is not necessarily a villain per se, but the thing that used to piss me off more than anything is I've talked about this at least once on the podcast, but back in the Mortal Kombat 2 days, there was a certain fatality you could do with Shang Tsung. And it basically meant that the player, the second round, had, I think, low kick held down the entire time. And if you released it after defeating them, it would do the Kintaro fatality. And that in itself was like a villain. When someone broke that out on you, you knew you performed poorly enough that they could totally beat you while holding down a button, and they didn't have access to it during the entire match.
It's insult to injury.
Yeah, it's an insult to injury type thing.
That's a soft spot right there. I didn't even think of that until you mentioned it, and now I'm just upset and so salty right now.
Yeah, I know, because if you had that broken out on you in the arcade, you knew man, you were horrible that round, or this person was that much better than you.
That's an elevated level of anger, though, because you invested a whole 2 quarters into that.
Yeah.
You just lost yours. There goes laundry for the night.
Yeah, or if you got a babality done on you. Like, Mortal Kombat was really good at creating trolly things you could do to other players.
I feel as if the board game Risk would do that for you, and that makes everybody an enemy. Games like that are strategic and planning, and there is no villain. It's you against whoever you're playing and who you know. Those are the games that are gnarly.
Like playing Mario, where the more recent Marios are the biggest villains are your own friends.
Mm-hmm. I am not allowed to play Risk. It has been determined.
That, Monopoly, and Super Mario Maker, I think, are the ones for me that are not allowed in the house.
I'm thinking too about. I mean, so we still haven't had our Fallout 4 episode yet, but for that game, I feel like by the time I finished the story of that, I was the villain of that game.
I feel like the whole world was the villain of that game. Like, I felt so jaded by the end of it. You know, you come out of your vault and you're like, yeah, look at all these people I can help. And they all have got their things that they're doing. And then by the end of the game, you're like, fuck all of you. I'm going to go dress up in a raider costume and kill shit and not help any of you because you're all the literal worst.
Yep.
I think sort of riffing off of what Grace was saying, one of my favorite villains from a video game is Darth Revan.
Yup.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Because he's this specter through all of Knights of the Old. Like, by the way, I'm gonna spoil a bunch of games, so
Yeah, like we should probably have put a disclaimer that in talking about villains, we're probably going to give away pieces of games.
I'm gonna try not to spoil any games that aren't 10 years old or more.
But look, it's almost been like 2 decades now.
Yeah.
KOTOR is within the law of, public domain now.
But like, as you go through KOTOR, you see everybody you run into talks about the devastation and the pain caused by Darth Revan just through this whole game. And it's brutal, and you're like, oh, what a horrible person that is. Like, I'm glad he's not still around.
Oh, wait.
Oh, that's why all of those people were so awkward. That's why everybody's uncomfortable around me.
What was awesome about it is I was around this same time I was watching my way through Trigun, and it reminded me of the way that people talked about Vash the Stampede, where the legend of Revan was far worse than Revan itself. Like, people made Revan out to be this all-powerful specter of a being, and nothing that I've really seen in that game or any of the further games tells me that really I don't think he was that powerful. Like, I mean, he was powerful, but like, people made him out to be the boogeyman of boogeymen.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about KOTOR is that as you're going through the game, you're learning to be the boogeyman of boogeymen. It's just that you're fighting Sith, not generally fighting Sith, not fighting, innocents. And so when the reveal comes, you're like, oh wow, I can see how this guy would be horrible because I've been doing all of that. I am good at that.
So, like, I absolutely feel from a certain aspect, Final Fantasy XIV is revening us in that we're this warrior of light, but depending upon your point of view, we're also this person that has terrorized all of these beast tribes, killed their gods.
We are, in some ways, the reason why they keep summoning primals.
Right.
Well, when we were talking about villains who we might think are right, like who we might question whether we should be fighting them, Gaius Van Belsark did kind of come to mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't feel bad about killing Titan, though. To this day, Titan X, I'm more than okay with that. More than okay.
Titan X was an asshole.
Everything about Titan made me upset about life, but
the music was good.
The music was good.
Oh, yeah. But I feel as if with Star Wars, with Final Fantasy XIV, I think the storylines, I think that's something that they do so well. The storylines really kind of bring that pot to a boil just to make it half the surprise. I don't think there's a whole lot of games that can do that.
You know, the other game where you absolutely became the villain was World of Warcraft.
Yep.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
in Wrath of the Lich King, I got just... it wasn't subtle about it. Everything I did caused more calamity.
Yeah.
And, like, because it wasn't subtle about it, I got very, very frustrated with that game. It's like, do these quests. Oh, ha ha ha. You've made the world that much worse for doing these quests.
Even the places, that expansion in particular, but even in some of the other ones, there were a lot of quests where it's like, okay, no big deal. You're just gonna go and torture these guys now because that's what you do. So go to it. Yeah.
I will say, though, that Wrath was probably the most memorable expansion for me because it had the one villain at the end of it that I actually cared about killing. Like, from the moment I touched Warcraft lore, I was all about killing Arthas, because...
Yeah, they said Arthas so well.
I mean, because,
even
like...
as someone who never played the RTSs, I still was super satisfied to kill Arthas by the end of that expansion.
I mean, yeah, it falls into the category of tragic well-meaning villain, but yeah, like, by the time we were done with that expansion, I was so ready to kill him in a way that I just didn't care about any other villain to that point. Like, there's a lot of people that were all about, knocking Illidan off his perch, but I cared about Arthas. Like, he was the one that betrayed us. And, yeah, like, so, and the thing with the Lich King was, it was a similarly insidious villain that you kept running into throughout that expansion. And he kept toying with us as we went along. Because there were several points where he absolutely could have ended us. Like, it would have been no big deal. It would just been a wave of his hand.
Well, and that's what I think is somewhat interesting about it, especially in light of sort of how that last actual fight with the Lich King went compared to other expansions later on. Because that expansion, there was a little bit of flack about, oh, how much we see the Lich King and he never actually kills us, haha. And then you see what happens in that fight where there's actually a reason for that and they spell it out, which is cool. Whereas I feel like with Deathwing,